The coronavirus outbreak is threatening global supply chains.
Talk of shortages of anything from medicines to toilet paper.
Temporary iPhone shortage.
Mask shortages.
And pasta and Clorox wipes are also selling out.
A shortage of chips for new vehicles, which has automakers scrambling.
People didn't understand what a supply chain was until suddenly.
Supply chains.
Supply chains.
Supply chains.
Supply chain.
Supply chain disruptions and problems, they did not start with COVID. In fact, we can look back, for example, to the US-China trade war. In that instance, when tariffs were increased significantly, we have seen disruptions in supply chains and products becoming more expensive and scarcer. In addition, there are other emergencies and weather conditions that have also contributed to disruptions in supply chains. But what happened during COVID was all of these issues were really brought to the forefront and the problem multiplied by magnitudes. And so we're at a point now where the word supply chain is kind of a common term used by the American public, a term that a few years ago, no one would know what you were talking about if you talked about supply chain vulnerabilities. Traditionally, trade was conducted between two countries. If you wanted to buy a product from another country, that product would be shipped from country B back to your country. But what's happened over time is that what used to be trade between two countries has been multiplied. And many countries now are involved in providing inputs into products, but also companies in many countries are conducting key services such as packaging, such as labeling, such as final assembly. And as a result, it's not uncommon for the product that you buy in an electronics store or in the supermarket to involve inputs from many different countries, sometimes 10. But if you're talking about a car, for example, this could involve many more countries. It just depends on the product. Before COVID, there were signs in certain instances that supply chains were becoming a problem. But I think what COVID has shown that there are a lot of vulnerabilities in our supply chains that affect a myriad of products. And so as a result, strategies to mitigate risk and to lessen vulnerabilities has become a key objective of companies and governments. So for example, diversifying supply chains has become important. The notion that you're going to rely on one source for inputs into your product is a dangerous strategy these days because, as we've seen during COVID, for example, during the lockdown in Wuhan, which was a manufacturing hub for electronics and automotive parts and other products, companies' productions in other countries were immediately affected. And one example that comes to mind is Hyundai, the Korean car manufacturer. Hyundai relied on a key part in Wuhan for its cars. And when that part was not available and they had no other source for that part, they ended up actually having to shut production lines. And so diversifying, mitigating risks, trying to anticipate your vulnerabilities, and then taking early action to address your vulnerabilities is really important. And I think that's what COVID has shown us day after day. So here at ASPI, we early on were looking at these supply chain challenges, and we were thinking, what kind of contribution could we make? And what we decided after reading a lot of press and talking to a lot of folks from different countries it seemed that what people haven't paid attention to is that many governments, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, have recognized that supply chains are moving, that there are opportunities to attract this production and foreign direct investment. And as a result, many countries in the region have put in place policies to attract this investment and to make business easier to pursue in their countries. And what we have done as a result is put together an interactive digital tool providing general data, but also providing detailed information about specific policies that governments have either announced or have actually put in place to attract investment, either by offering tax breaks for companies investing, offering financial assistance and subsidies, reducing regulatory barriers and red tape, and also just overall improving their business climate. Our tool encompasses 17 economies in the region and details the measures that they are taking to either attract investment or, in some cases, to reshore some of the production that has left their countries back to their shores. And to date, we have compiled about 180 policies among these 17 economies that have been either announced or implemented. So we view this tool as kind of filling a void, kind of a one-stop shop for information on the investment climate of economies in the Indo-Pacific region, one that will be a dynamic tool that we will update on a regular basis to make sure that up-to-date information is available for users and folks who access and use this new tool. I think there are really three winners here through supply chain resiliency. Well, first, companies, I think they will be better prepared for disruptions in the future by not relying on just one source of supply, particularly given the possibility of future pandemics, weather instances, climate change, and other unforeseen emergencies. Second, I think the economies that are trying to attract foreign direct investment and supply chain movement are clear winners here as well, because through this foreign direct investment, they will be able to grow their economies, develop their economies, hopefully move up more quickly up the value chain in terms of producing more sophisticated products, but also providing, additional jobs for their citizens. And finally, consumers will benefit. And this kind of gets back to what we were saying early on, and that is that during COVID in the early stages, but now in later stages, we are seeing many shortages, whether it again be PPE or autos or electronics products or appliances. Hopefully, if supply chain resiliency and diversification is achieved, consumers will see fewer shortages, meaning more stable supply, more stable prices as well. Because what we have seen during COVID is, particularly when there are shortages, the demand is high, the response is then prices are raised because the supply is limited. So again, consumers, economies in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as US and global companies, I think will benefit from further supply chain resiliency. If you're interested in learning more about supply chain diversification, and in particular, what steps economies in the region are taking to attract shifting supply chains, I urge you to access the Asia Society Policy Institute website.